Elaine, thank you so much for coming to the Inside Scoop today. For those of you who it's the first time listening, the Inside Scoop is the podcast where we get the inside stories from investors, operators, and founders behind how companies really run and operate. So, Elaine, super excited to have you on today.
Thanks so much for having me, Janet.
Awesome. Could you, just to start out with, share a little bit about your own background? You've got such a diverse background, including marketing, VC, founder. So you've done a little bit of everything for the types of folks we have on, and we'd just love to learn a little bit more about your story.
I always joke, it's like naturally I'm doing a enterprise AI startup because I was a biomechanical engineer turned go-to-marketer turned venture capitalist turned now founder. I started my career as a biomechanical engineer. I did undergrad and grad school at Stanford, thought I was going to build med devices. I come from a family of doctors and realized very quickly how slow that world is. I'm super impatient, so I took the dive into early stage startups, joining a company out of college as one of the first employees, and really got to cut my teeth there in terms of learning a lot of the skills on all things company building. But in particular, nobody was doing go to market. So I ended up just attaching myself to that because it was critical for the company and it was a good fit for my personality. I love people, I'm very extroverted, and I liked being that connective tissue between the market and the customers and then the product and engineers. So I spent 5 years there. We scaled the team, raised about 75 million, and I got to know our investors very well too, and started getting some feedback from them that, hey, can you meet with some of our other portfolio to help them with growth and go to market? That was actually how I ended up transitioning eventually to venture capital. I had become an advisor to a few venture capital firms, one of which brought me in-house. And so I spent 5 years at SignalFire, investing in early stage companies at the intersection of AI and enterprise software, and got to see the evolution of how generative AI was evolving. I always knew I was going to start something. I built my first Gen AI product in 2018 called SoundSpot, which could turn any blog into a podcast. So now it's kind of magic to be able to do that with Notebook LM or things like that. But at this time, this was GPT-1 and Google's transformer for speech called Tacotron, which I love the name still. And it felt like magic. If you listen to it now, it'd be laughable. But about 2 years ago, became pretty convinced that there was a giant opportunity to build the next Salesforce, but for top of funnel and use generative AI at the base. And that's what brought me to Tofu.
That's super interesting, especially as you start to see the Gen AI wave before most of us were aware of it. I think most people, I listened to a presentation recently from a friend at Google, and she was pointing out spell check technically does have those AI components, which many of us have been using for a long time. But Chat GPT was really when it started to awaken to the world of possibilities. For yourself, how has seeing companies operate through three different angles really impacted your own view of what investors will look for your own company, Tofu?
I definitely had asymmetric information and strategic advantages starting a company, having seen both the inside of a company go from zero to about 150 people and many millions in ARR, then being on the investing side where I got to see hundreds of companies, some that were exceptional and scaled and became, unicorns, some that failed very quickly, and getting to see and learn the pattern matching skills is unbelievably useful. So I think for me with Tofu, there are a few things that I always tell early stage founders. There are no more, in my opinion, there are no more technical moats to be had for the most part. Even if you look at OpenAI, there's half a dozen other models that are constantly competing to win for all the different benchmarks that they're tracking. However, there are a few things that you can actually build moats around today. There's workflow, distribution, and data. And I think you need to be an amazing company, all three, but at least two of them. So in the early days, understanding who are your users, what is their day-to-day workflow, how do you reduce friction, and how do you win on workflow? The second piece is distribution. What is your asymmetric advantage when it comes to distribution? Do you have a network of thousands of your target audience already built in? Are you somehow really clever when it comes to building community, and that's going to be your moat? However it works, it really doesn't matter. But having some kind of advantage when it comes to distribution can really help you win. And then the third piece is, how do you have data that no one else has, and how can you use that to your advantage? And using these in your pitch for investors will go really far in terms of convincing them that you're going to build a great company.
Those are some really great insights. How did you apply them specifically to your own company?
we are doing all three. So I think for us, and we actually staged it as that. So I think with Tofu in the beginning, we said, look, we are taking the platform approach from day one. We are taking a platform, but going very, very laser focused on the marketing teams at enterprise companies. So for us, a marketing team consists of this entire group of people that all have very different and today very siloed functions. You have content marketing, social media, paid digital, demand gen, sometimes ABM as a part of demand gen. You have your SEO, your lifecycle marketing team, international marketing team, each of which has different roles. They use different tools. They're working off of different data. What would it look like to build a platform just encompassing all of their workflows and making it so that teams can really do integrated marketing and integrated campaigns? People talk about this a lot. Most people aren't actually executing it. I think that term is ripe for a rebrand, but I truly think now we can actually do integrated. So for us, we really went deep on the workflows of what does your day look like? What tools are you using? How can we remove any kind of obstacles in your way and help you both scale your content, reduce the time, and also make everything consistent among all the different touch points in the marketing team? On the distribution side, this was actually one of my strategies from day one. Before we even had a product in market, I started finding people within my network or my network's network who are big name CMOs. And I started doing a series of what I called AMAs, so Ask Me Anything webinars with them. And the idea was to learn from them, but also get their insights as to how marketing was shifting in the age of generative AI. And through this, I would take these webinars, chop them into a bunch of content. I would turn it into video clips, blog content, a bunch of social content. And that's really how we started growing our awareness among CMOs, because I was really trying to boost up the brand of some of these amazing marketers, but in turn, tie ourselves to them and really make it seem like we were bigger than we are. So that was kind of my distribution strategy. And then when it comes to data, we are collecting interesting data because we connect to our customers' systems of record, things like Salesforce, Marketo, HubSpot. We understand how content is performing, how campaigns are performing on each channel, with each persona, at what time. Now we're using that data to do interesting things when it comes to creating a continuous feedback loop with these AI models. But as we aggregate data across our customers, we can, in a privacy preserving way, use this to be proactive as opposed to reactive. So actually turn things from co-pilot to autopilot such that we can take a customer and say, hey, here's who you should be targeting, on which channel, with which message, at what time, and use that data to inform it. So those are kind of our three-pronged approaches to go to market.
That's interesting, especially taking a step back. You've seen marketing and how it's evolved over time. So you're doing kind of what the cutting edge of marketing should be in 2025, thinking through how to develop it through 2026 and 27. How have you seen marketing as a function really evolve over the past 15 years?
The first thing that started happening was marketing became much more data driven. If you look back, marketing was very brand. It was fluffy. It was brand and advertising. And as marketing started getting more data driven, they started getting more budget and more tools because they were actually influencing revenue. And I think you've seen it go from measuring marketing on NQLs as the initial piece of that data driven approach to measuring on opportunities and now being tied to revenue. And again, that's really just giving them more power to control a major function of the go-to-market and the business holistically. Other things we've seen, for better for worse, marketing is one of the worst offenders when it came to proliferation of SaaS. Marketing teams bought 15 different tools. And that's great because some of these point solutions helped an individual workflow. The problem is now you have 15 tools with 15 data silos and 15 user experiences and 15 logins. And then you had to hire RevOps to come and stitch everything together, or marketing ops, but now it's become holistic across the revenue functions. So I'd say that's one thing where people got a little bit too tool happy and now they're trying to swing back in the other direction and consolidate tools. What we're seeing now too, when it comes to marketing, is this real drive to do more with less. So we saw boom times and then we saw some pullback. And the name of the game right now with marketing teams is, hey, we have a leaner team than ever. We have loftier goals. We're being tied to revenue. We have to produce. We have to produce with less people. We want to use tools to fill in the gaps, but we also want to really be a cohesive unit driving at shared goals with not only our team, but with the entire go-to-market team, which encompasses sales, marketing, and customer success. So people are very excited about AI tools because it really can help them do more with less and fill in those gaps. So I'd say those are some of the areas I've seen really change. The last piece that's happened much more recently is a lot of the existing channels that were working for top of funnel or for demand gen are no longer working. So doing the old spray and pray approach, broad segmentation, mass targeting, not working. Cold email, not really working. People are doing what I'm calling integrated micro campaigns. So they're trying, the ones that are working at least, they are taking a much narrower slice of their ICP and doing small campaigns, highly targeted and very deep on personalization. This is figuring out who are these exact titles, what do they care about, what are their pain points, what channels do they leverage, and can I go and get in front of them in both physical and digital respects. So it's hosting small events, attending physical events, doing more webinars, doing more content and education, doing more like high touch but personalized campaigns at a smaller scale. That's what I also feel like is going to be pushing into 2025, 2026.
And for that, do you think those trends are specific to B2B, B2C, B2B software, everything B2B?
That's a great question. And I am a moron when it comes to anything B2C. So my entire world and my entire life forever has been B2B. I always joked on the investor side, I don't shop, I don't game, I don't care about pop culture, I don't really watch TV, I don't like do any of the consumery things. So I think when it comes to that, over my head, but I can tell you it's very, very true when it comes to B2B.
And specific towards B2B, do you see B2B evolving differently within software companies versus outside of software companies? You mentioned selling to B2B CMOs, but we didn't get into if those CMOs are, the type of CMO at a FANG company or the CEO of, say, a JP Morgan.
I'm seeing shockingly similar things when it comes to more traditional industries and then tech companies. There is a swing towards doing things that are a little bit more in person, high touch. So I would say that's very consistent. Being more tailored and personalized in messaging across different channels, more consistent. Things like cold calling, which in my wildest imagination would not expect that to work with tech companies, but I would expect it to work with more traditional companies. People are seeing it work across both. So I am finding less differences than I'm finding similarities when it comes to those kind of camps of companies.
I saw your post recently on LinkedIn, specifically around cold calling. Can you say some of the types of responses that you got?
Yeah, it's been fascinating to me because I'm the kind of person, I'm squarely millennial. I do not pick up my phone whatsoever. Anyone can try cold calling me, not going to happen. And I think part of it's my internal bias of expecting everyone else to have that same behavior that I do. What I'm hearing from people and the feedback I got from polling the LinkedIn universe is that cold calling actually is working quite well for people. And I think there was a couple of themes that I took away. One theme is there's all these tools and parallel dialers now that really help you do things at scale. So it's much more about getting a few connects and making those really high quality. So I think that has changed it from having a physical human go and punch in numbers to saying, let's parallel dial 100 numbers, get one person on the phone and make our salesperson very good at that conversation. The second thing is people right now, because voicemails get transcribed, people are actually reading the transcription, which helps with brand awareness. So if they see the name of your company, and one piece of advice I got was if you are leaving voicemails, to make sure to early in the voicemail and very articulately say the name of the company so that when they see you on any other channel, they have that brand familiarity. And to me, that actually makes a lot of sense. It's really just doing air cover for the other channels so that when they see your name, when they see your company name, they are going to at least give it a look, as opposed to being like, I've never heard of this company before. So those are kind of my core takeaways. I will tell you, I still haven't done much when it comes to that yet, but I think we're going to test it. The one thing that I do find quite effective is doing voicemail on LinkedIn. So you can, in a direct message to somebody on LinkedIn, only using the mobile app, you can leave an actual voice message. And those perform really well. I think part of it is it's still a novelty right now. Most people have never received a voice message. So there's the party trick aspect. In the future, that might be a channel that doesn't work anymore, but for now, it works really well.
One of the things you hit on right there, the party trick aspect, certain things that worked. I remember my first job was an SDR out of college after, similar to yourself, operating, being a rat neurosurgeon for a year and a half. And I remember certain things, they'd work until they didn't. So the day of LinkedIn in-mails, we got early access. They worked great for a couple months. They still work today, but they don't have a 100% hit rate like they did for a very short window. How are you seeing that pace of change changing?
Everything about marketing is always around being an early adopter to new channels that work and then being quick to adopt net new ones. I think the people who wait for other people to find the channels and then adopt are missing the mark completely. Also, the people who expect channels to work indefinitely are also completely missing the mark. Good marketers are extremely adaptable. They're extremely quick to test new things and also trying to think one step ahead of where are the new channels. Now, I think the thing that is the most important for being good on the marketing and go to market side is deeply understanding your audience and where are they. It does not matter that LinkedIn email works if your audience is not on LinkedIn. So it really is audience dependent, and you have to focus on those people and meet them where they want to be met. So I think that right now is an interesting time because a lot of the channels that people have relied on are not working, yet there hasn't really been anything net new on the B2B side that's emerged. And people are kind of waiting for what is that next channel. And to be honest, I don't really know. I've been kind of polling people on all kinds of things of, hey, how can you do B2B text messaging? Because consumers do that. And apparently there's a lot of legal reasons why that's a bad idea. On the cold calling thing, similarly, I'm kind of like, well, can I automate personalized voicemails? Because I can clone my voice in 11 labs. I can use Tofu to go and generate personalized voicemail messages. Apparently, that's also on the edge of legality. So I think there's certain things where watching on the VC side, I used to tell people all the time, changes in regulations are such a good open door for new companies to be built, and similarly for new channels to be adopted. And so I always watch for things like that of where are the doors that open, and things like changes in regulations can open new doors for marketers. So I think that's something to pay attention to. But this is going to be a fun year because I think as SEO gets harder, as deprecation of cookies makes things like de-anonymizing traffic harder, as email dies as a channel, people are going to be searching and experimenting for new channels. And I am hoping that we can find a couple that are interesting to play with.
One of the things you mentioned there was around regulation. We're recording this on November 8th, where we've come after a solidification of what comes next in the United States. Anything we should be watching for in the next year around regulation?
I have no freaking clue. I'll be the first to say it's going to be an interesting turn of events, and we'll see what that means. And I think it's going to be an administration that's relatively tech friendly, which is in that sense positive. But in terms of what gets enacted, I could not fathom a guess.
Fair, I'm asking you because I have no idea either.
It's going to be unpredictable. I can be pretty confident in that, no matter what.
Very, very fair. Some of the things that you mentioned too around tracking and around really trying to understand what is or is not working. How do you take the kind of approach behind dark social? So for audience members not familiar with this, it's the idea of I made a post on LinkedIn and then 3 months later somebody comes to my website because they saw that post. We're familiar with it in the days of billboards, but there's more types of ways these days that you can do it. Elaine, any thoughts on maybe ways that we don't know to track it that will be coming up, or different things around just having to have that brand awareness, similar to what you said, if you leave a voicemail and hope at some point it comes back?
I love that you asked this question because I will tell you anecdotally, we ask, I used to do innumerable first calls. So my calendar was just back to back to back first calls of people that came inbound booking a demo. And every single person, I'd say, how'd you hear about us? And I will tell you, it was shocking how many people saw LinkedIn posts. And again, I then went back and looked. They didn't like anything. They didn't comment on anything. They didn't interact in any way, shape, or form. And so it's one of those things where you're like, oh my God, like it's working, but I have no data to support that it's working. So I think this is very challenging. Best practices here, which is not rocket science whatsoever, is to have ways to capture how people heard about you. And that could be literally manually on a call, or as they request a demo, making that a required field. As they're filling out any kind of form, making that a required field. Somehow in a post-call survey, capturing that. Doesn't really matter how you do it, but to the extent you can, you'll start to get at least some moderate data around people who are actually converting, whatever that first conversion event is. I think what we've tried to do too is add for posts that we're doing where there are links to be clicked through, adding at least some UTM parameters so that you can get some sense of, for an example, with us on LinkedIn, are they coming from our LinkedIn company page? Are they coming from social posts? Are they coming from ads? Where within the LinkedIn universe are they coming from? It's important for us to know where to double down. For example, if they're coming mostly from social organic, that's free. I'll do that all day, every day. If they're coming mostly from ads, well, now I have a CAC associated. I have to go and figure out what the right spend is, how I'm going to go and scale that program. So I think getting as much data as you can by tracking those links is great. But to your point, on the organic side, there's a lot of dark social happening. So just ask. Best thing I can say right now.
Around LinkedIn, did you get any sense of what was performing better or worse? I heard an anecdote from one friend at what's now a pretty late stage company where one of their early posts that was successful was one of their key team members going on maternity leave. And I think it was when they came back, they made a post, had more impressions than anything else, more impressions, likes, comments, reshares. And I know there's a lot between how do I post about my overall brand versus more company specific versus personal. I'd be curious what your takes on there, what performs best and gets the most likes versus what actually converts people into hearing more about your company.
So I had this epiphany, I think it was last week, where I'm like, oh my God, LinkedIn is becoming Twitter. And I don't know if it's because Twitter has gone like this, or if it's natural because people on the more professional side see this as a way to build audience and brand when things like email aren't working. Whatever it is literally becoming Twitter. And there are certain patterns that work in Twitter, and those things are now working in LinkedIn. There's kind of four emerging patterns I'm seeing. The first one is the vulnerable personal post. So talking about, like, I just did one, which I'm so uncomfortable doing, but I'm forcing myself. I just did one around how we launched the product a year ago, and I was 2 weeks away from giving birth to my second child. And navigating a year of building a company when it's literally going from 0 to 1, also raising, two small humans, not an easy task. And that performed exceptionally well. Again, it's that authentic, it's vulnerable, and it's making me relatable. The other ones that are performing well, it's kind of the Twitter thread ported to LinkedIn. So it's creating long form content, but it's interesting and it's a story told in pieces. You'll have literally like a catchy title or first paragraph, and then it's breaking things out into sections of learnings, of storyline, and that's doing well. The other thing I see all the time, which again feels very Twitter-esque, is bombastic first sentence or claim followed by here's what I learned, or here's how I did it, or here's what you should know. That also seems to be doing well. And then the last one I will say is videos that are practical, tactical. So I do a lot of very short 2 to 3 minute video clips, mostly of product stuff, either our product, other products, cool things I've seen in the wild. And that stuff also does really well. People do like video content. It's a joke that there's a Maslow's hierarchy of content, and it starts with text, and then you go to audio, then image, then video. And video at the apex is the most rich media. It's the most desirable to consume for people who have our attention spans right now. So short videos do well. Those are the 4 buckets.
I can say personally, so I saw your cold call one. I did see your one about building a company 2 weeks after giving birth. And I think there is something to be said for what are those stories behind. That's one of the reasons we have the podcast, The Inside Scoop, is what do people not see from the outset when you're looking on the website?
Yeah, one thing I also should add is people go to these platforms to engage. Like it is a social platform by nature. And I think people often thought of LinkedIn less for that and more as a resume, is like, this is where my resume lives. But the social aspect of the platform has taken off. And so the other thing that I'm trying to do, and it's actually, I'm only doing it when I really have genuine questions or genuinely want to understand how other people think about a topic. I'm asking somewhat controversial questions. So to your point, the cold calling one, I did a poll yesterday around who owns webinars at large companies, because I was on 3 customer calls and we were going through different use cases around webinars. And the people who owned it were completely different titles at different companies. And my brain was like, wait a second. I thought this only one team owned webinars. Does everyone own webinars? So doing a poll, people want to contribute. And so giving them an easy way to have an opinion and an easy way to contribute also is a great way to build engagement and also just build rapport with your audience.
On the webinar comment too, do you think some of that could be more people are owning more parts of the funnel these days? So when you said that, had you asked me 2 minutes prior, I would have said, of course, it's the marketing teams that owns webinar. And as soon as you said that, I was like, oh, of course, customer success needs webinars in order to really understand what's going on for, the new product releases, new features. And then I thought, oh, of course, sales also should have webinars because they're thinking through, okay, what's the middle of funnel conversion? Is there something to be said where everyone has to do everything? And
It's even more nuanced. It's even more nuanced than that. And this is where it's crazy, but also goes back to our early part of the conversation around marketing teams being so siloed and owning one tiny slice of the bigger piece. So if you think about a webinar, we'll just take typical demand gen webinars. You have the demand gen team who's owning a number around producing MQLs and opportunities. You have your content team who needs to actually develop the content for the webinar. If it's a customer that's going to be on the webinar, you have your customer marketing team who's going to be involved. You have to send email invites. So now you have your email team involved. You have to host a registration page. So now you have your web development and web marketing team involved. You're probably going to run ads for it. So now you have your paid digital team involved. Now you run the webinar. Post-webinar, you have your sales team or your BDR, SDR teams following up with the attendees and the registrants. You have your content team involved in turning that content into other stuff. You have your social media team involved in promoting all of those snippets and pieces. So it's a lot of people involved. And that many moving pieces is really hard to coordinate. And so I think it's almost one of those situations where I feel like companies would be better off if fewer cooks were in the kitchen. And that's potentially where we go with some of the new tools introduced. But I also feel at the same time, it's workflow and behavior shift where you're actually now telling people, hey, you don't have to be involved in this, which might go over well and might go over poorly. And so it'll be interesting to see how that evolves. But to me, I think there's way too many cooks in the kitchen with most campaigns.
you'd see that changing for the better or for the worse in 2025?
I think for the better, because I think, again, where I always lean on when it comes to adopting AI in particular, the humans still need to be the creatives and the strategists. And that's the fun part of their job. Like, people should not feel threatened because it's opening up your time to focus on the fun stuff, not on the manual, laborious, menial, repetitive tasks. And I always use this as an example, but how many people want to go and write 16 different ad copy variations? That's not fun work. But coming up with the campaign strategy of what is the overall ad campaign we're going to run and why? That's the more fun part. So in general, I do think that AI tools remove a lot of the unfun stuff. Watching a webinar and literally going with a fine-tooth comb and finding the best snippets and then clipping it and creating, audiograms, that's not fun work. But AI can go and remove all of that and let people focus on the more fun parts, which is, hey, let's think through what is our webinar strategy? Who do we want to have on it? What should the content be? How are we going to promote it? Those are the things that the human should focus on. So I'm hoping for the better. And I'm hoping that it will reduce the number of people involved, but let the people who are involved focus on the strategic stuff and the creative stuff.
What for you personally has been the biggest thing that you found for AI that you're like, I'm just so glad I don't have to do this?
Oh, I'll give you two that I absolutely love for my day-to-day. Whenever we do a case study with a customer, I take a Zoom recording of a conversation with that customer, and I map it to a template that we already have for case studies. And our templates are very specific. It's like H1, block of text, 2 statistics, block of text, pull quote. At the top, we have company name, headquarters, number of employees, industry. Writing that, not super fun. Taking it in under 3 minutes from call recording to published case study is awesome. So that's been a huge accelerant for me. Another one that's been a really, really clever and cool use case is when I have a deal that is late stage, but not at the finish line yet. If my champion is somebody more in the middle management realm and not like the C-suite person, what I do is I take every historical call we've had with that company And I have also a template that's a business case to enable my internal champion to sell to the execs in the C-suite. So what I do is I take all the calls, it goes and mines all the information, and it populates this business case that I hand over to the champion to go and then shop around and sell internally. And that's worked so well for us. It makes the champion look like they've done a tremendous amount of work and be super thoughtful. And it's pulled together information around what is this product? How will we use it? Who's involved? What's the ROI? What does the onboarding look like? What does the pricing look like? Everything. And that's been a really cool one as well. That's unlocked a lot of opportunity for us.
Well, that's a fascinating one and a really interesting use of AI that previously wouldn't have been able to do. Because I remember in sales, we always said, okay, build out this template. There's a lot of things you can do, and building out a very nice template isn't always at the top of the list.
And also, I might have had 7 calls with this company previously. I'm not going to remember everything that we talked about in call number 2. And so, it finding that piece where they mention a major pain point or a sense of urgency or a spend dollar amount that we can then articulate back to them. Those are the nuggets that really move the needle and enable us to calculate what is the ROI, understand what does the timing look like on their side, all those things that are just captured in those calls. That's where I see the tremendous value. I would never be able to do that manually.
That makes sense. I find these things fascinating in terms of how people are utilizing AI to do things where we all had it on our to-do list, but it fell under probably never going to happen.
Yeah, that's actually the number one thing people get excited about on the content repurposing side with Tofu, because they always had it on their to-do list to turn a lot of their meaty assets like ebooks, white papers, case studies, webinars, podcast episodes into a bunch of derivative content, or take some things that are high performing and create variations by persona or variations by industry. It's been on the to-do list forever, but no one ever got to it. And so now being able to just very easily point AI in that direction, now they can actually go and execute on all that stuff. It's not just a scale thing. We know we should be doing this, but we have not been able to.
What other parts of Tofu have you designed for those we should be able to do it, but we haven't been able to, for whether it's the reason of the derivative content or simplifying and streamlining what you kind of phrased as the marketing content and process?
So I'll also touch on the ABM side, the one-to-one marketing. I need a new term for ABM because ABM was used historically to mean something very different. So I'll let you know when I come up with a good term. But for one-to-one marketing, what'd you say?
Targeted account-based marketing? Plug it in ChatGPT and come up with something.
I tried that. I didn't like anything. So I'm back at the drawing board. I'll figure it out at some point. But for one-to-one marketing, we'll call it for now. Most companies have either tried to do ABM in some way, shape, or form, or are doing it right now at a very tiny scale. This is something where we had many customers that were doing 2 to 5 accounts per quarter or per month. And that was the most they could possibly do with their given team bandwidth. That also is something where, unless you land all of those 2 to 5 accounts, is that really worth having a human dedicated to that? And this to me is something where they know they should be scaling this. They know one-to-one works really well. They know being more personalized is going to resonate more. It's going to move people through the funnel faster. It's going to get more people from the top of the funnel to the middle of the funnel. And this is where Tofu really shines, of being able to go and ingest lists of either tier 1 accounts, people engage with you in some way, shape, or form, people have attended an event or a webinar, do account research, person research, and then use that data to create personalized omni-channel campaigns. That's also a really big piece of it too. It's not just throwing up a landing page. It's saying every touch point with this company and this person is going to be personalized and integrated. So our emails are going to be messaging something that links to a personalized landing page, which is reiterating that message. Our ads are reiterating that message. Our DMs on LinkedIn are reiterating that message. And it's all personalized based off of this person's unique pain points, value propositions we want to get across to them, and then really meeting them on the channels where they live.
That's really interesting, especially as I'm trying to think through what marketing will look like. I've seen it both at my current scale, and I worked with the marketing team at JP Morgan, and they're very similar issues for both.
That comes back to our previous, right? It's crazy how it's shocking, but people always ask us what industries work best for Tofu. And I'm like, it does not matter. We have companies that are legacy old school industries, we have high tech, we have construction tech, we have healthcare, we have fintech, we have cybersecurity, we have dev tools, we have marketing tech. It's literally across the board because, to your point, the problems are similar and it just gets bigger as the scale gets bigger.
What are some of the trends that you see coming out for 2025?
Micro campaigns. That's, I would say, one of the biggest is being much more segmented, tailored, and niche. People before were doing way too much in terms of scale. If you're speaking to everyone, you're speaking to no one adage is really true. And it's becoming more and more acute in terms of not resonating, not working. So I think that's going to be a really big trend. And this is going to be the year where people stop playing and really adopt AI tools on the marketing side. I think the last year, both for sales and marketing, has been a lot of experimentation. Everyone is trying to wrap their heads around what should we be doing? Where is it ready for prime time? Where are the areas of highest leverage? And then what tools do we select to do that? And then how do we make it repeatable? It feels like early adopters have gotten to the point where they're sold, but they are now doing kind of tool selection. Next year, I think people are going to move beyond that experimentation and it'll become part of everyone's tech stack.
And in terms of a lot of that experimentation, anything in particular or tools that you're like, ooh, I'd really like to see this. I don't see it in the market yet, or I don't see the technology quite having developed enough.
Yeah, a few. One is images for B2B. So consumer images is pretty much a solved problem. But if you, for example, want me to match your exact brand guidelines and hex code colors, it's not going to work. I keep joking. I've tried every way, shape, and form to get B2B images that don't include text because you always overlay text, whether it's an ad image, whether it's a blog image or whatever. And it's still not quite there yet because people are very protective of their brand. It's not just changing out the background for an e-commerce image. It matters to people. Also, it's not like taking an image of a shoe and popping it in there. It's literally creating amorphous images that are on brand. That's one thing I'd love to see. It's getting better, but I feel like it's not quite there yet. We're hoping that 2025 will be the year that it's better. I also would love to see, there are a lot of people working on this, but in terms of figuring out, I would say it's next gen intent data, really around figuring out who you should be targeting right now. And there's a million data providers like Apollo and ZoomInfo and ExactBuyer and pick your data provider. That is you going and checking boxes and getting a segment of people that fit that description. But that description is something that I'm intuiting, not something that all the data in the universe is collecting and then being proactively shared with me. I want to have something telling me, here are the people and here are the exact channels and the reasons why. I think some of the intent data providers of, I would say like V2, are really good, but they lack a lot of explainability. And to me, that black box actually means that a lot of those people technically are not the right people, are not in market. I would rather have fewer people that have shown intent, but are extremely targeted and also explainable. Why? What did they do? Give me exact things. I want to see the exact data of why you think that I should go and reach out to them, because I can then use that data to do interesting things. So those are I would say, the two areas I'm most looking for.
Awesome. And I know we're coming up on time. Elaine, any questions that you have for me?
Ooh, yes. I mean, so many. So I guess, where are you seeing the most adoption right now of AI tools on the go-to-market side?
On the go-to-market side, I think it started with sales because sales is always looking for what is that next thing. So whether it's call recorders or a number of other types of tooling. Then I think marketing has been dabbling with it. But to your point, I could really see 2025 as the year marketing teams are really starting to say, okay, we need this more for just our content. I think probably everybody listening to this has recorded some call that they then put the transcript through and then pop out, here's the blog post, here's the top 10 and whatnot. But that content alone, I think just using that isn't where it's going, isn't going quite far enough. It's also, what else are we measuring? What are we targeting? I listened to, it was a talk from the MOPS person at OpenAI, and he was talking through, here's how I'm thinking through how to do lead scoring. and how using ChatGPT can help me, or any model, depending on your choice, can really help me think through, how am I scoring leads? Are these the right scores? And he walked through a couple different steps. First, the base case. Then he said, okay, it actually helped encourage me to do numbers instead of just words, because numbers could be numerically added versus trying to say, okay, if it's a medium, hot, does that average out as a more? And just
That's funny.
helping us think through that logic. And to your earlier point, it's having us all become editors. What I'll take it on your phrasing is, now that we're all editors, what can we do? There's so much more possibilities.
I totally agree. One last question for you. Since you obviously are deep in data and how people leverage and use data, what are best practices for go-to-market teams right now in terms of what and how they're using data, and where are people missing easy opportunities?
I think the biggest thing that people need to do better is data storytelling. So too often people get into conversations and say, here's what the data are. And they're not thinking, what is the story this is telling? Is this telling a story of a successful new campaign? Is this telling the story of, you know what, we've tried these 5 different things, of that we heard all of them failed, but they failed for different reasons, and here's what we should try next. So I think people too often look at a number and think that it can speak for itself, but it's really us telling the narrative. And that's what I think sometimes people could get better at and could perform, whether you're in a demand generation manager, a CRO, or the COO. There's so many different people who are responsible for different types of data stories and what's really getting told back. I think data stories gets a little bit of a bad rep sometimes, because people think, oh, we've all read those books of how to lie with statistics.
Yes, exactly.
But it's not that, it's knowing what the statistic is.
And then the actionable item after that. I like that a lot. And I feel like I harp to our team a lot on this concept of perceived value versus actual value. And a lot of stuff around that is, to me, feels like low-hanging fruit for tools to help with those stories. And just by helping get that person from here to there of understanding what is the story I should be telling, and then how do I action that, that's a tremendous amount of perceived value for that person to then go and take that to the team and do something with it. So I really like that. I think that's a great way of framing.
So awesome. Elaine, anything else before we end?
No, this is lovely. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. This has been, for everybody listening, this has been another episode of The Inside Scoop. And Elaine, thank you very much for your time today. It was absolutely fascinating.
Absolutely. Chat with you soon.
Thank you.
Bye.